First 'twas whales, them hunted down, their bones flung deep outside the town. We filled it up with tide-born dead, till live ones walked in there instead. Whale bones rattle under tide, they dance when no one's left behind. Don't start the tune, don't dig, behave. You can't unhear the drover's grave. My grandmother used to tell me that poem when I was misbehaving, fooling around too much, or just being a little too loud when I was a kid. She would shout in a way that scared me no matter where I was in the house. I could be upstairs in my bedroom, and I would hear her cane hit the floor with a thump before hearing her old, shaky voice yell it out at me. And every time, she would follow up with, "Keep up with what you're doing, and you'll end up in Drover Grave, Chris." When you're a kid, you don't really think about the words to stuff like that. You just hear the tone it's spoken in, and it puts a deep fear in you, like nothing else in the world could when you're that young. As time went on, those words carved their way into my mind, remembering the words to that short little poem each time it was spoken, even long after she had stopped speaking them to me, once I was old enough to behave. What was Drover's Grave? I was a teenager when I finally asked my grandmother where the poem came from and what it was about. My nan used to tell me that when I was just a young one. I remember her telling me, not an ounce of happiness from her voice as she sat there telling me what she knew. Some things best left be, Chris. Let a poem be just a poem, bye. She wouldn't tell me another word about it after that, no matter how many times I asked her. I don't know if it was her trying to protect me back then, or if she truly didn't know anything else beyond what she told me. Either way, she took whatever else she knew with her to the grave later that same year, leaving a hole in the family, but also a hole in any information I could gain from her. God, I miss her. And now I understand why she never said anything else. It was a mistake trying to find out more after all these years, and she was right. Some things were best left be. Most folklore from Newfoundland was made for two things: to keep children from misbehaving, or give drunken folk something to blame when they stumble back home, or tucked away in the shed late at night. Mermaids, ghosts, Newfoundland fairies, it didn't matter what it was. They all tended to lean into one or the other back then. But Drover's Grave, that one just felt different from all the other ones I've heard before. There was something there, and yet I couldn't figure it out. The more I looked, the less I found. It was like my grandmother was the only person to remain to know about this place, yet she passed this mystery down to me before she passed away. It used to drive me crazy thinking about it back then, what it was about, where it came from. What was Drover's Grave? I was at a dead end. There was nothing else to work off of than the very words my grandmother left for me, and for a long time, it remained like that, until a few weeks ago. My father is the kind of person who would keep everything we were given and tuck it neatly away in some forgotten corner of the house or shed until the time came to clean it out, like a magpie tucking shiny things away before forgetting about it moments later. He had done this to my grandmother's stuff for years, all of it tucked away in small brown boxes until disaster struck one day with water seeping into the basement. We had no clue where the leak was coming from, and the job fell on my shoulders to clean out the small room. My father would eventually dig around in the walls like an axe-wielding psycho looking for the last survivor to find the leak and fix it. How cleaning the room was thrown into my lap, I will never know. Yet, it was what I needed to discover more about Drover's Grave. A lot of the stuff my father held on to from my grandmother was junk. Random things he had a hard time getting rid of, even if it was simple stuff, like mugs, blankets, and other items, all stuffed into these boxes. But one object stood out from the others. It was a small, book-like object, tightly wrapped in a black, like garbage bag. In a way, it looked similar to how the Necronomicon was all wrapped up in the Evil Dead remake, minus the barbed wires, anyway. But it was for a good reason. Inside there was a Bible. An old Bible. So old the pages were leaking out of its bindings, the bag being the only thing keeping it together at the time, as I very gently pulled it free. I couldn't tell you just how old this Bible was. Its pages were stained a golden brown, the color was barely hanging on for its life, and whatever thin metal used to be on the corners of this book were either long gone or simply resting at the bottom of the bag. Out of everything, this was possibly one of those items my father would want to hold on to, even with its current condition. I was ready to wrap it up again when one of the pages caught my eye. The corner of it sticking out just a little more than the rest, when I noticed it had some sort of writing on it. It wasn't a page at all from the Bible. Instead, it was a single sheet of paper folded up, and on that little piece of paper was the poem my grandmother would tell me. But there was more. First 'twas whales, them hunted down, their bones flung deep outside the town. We filled it up with tide-born dead, till live ones walked in there instead. Whale bones rattle under tide, they dance when no one's left behind. Don't start the tune, don't dig, behave. You can't unhear the drover's grave. Never forget, blank, and the ones drover's grave took. Obviously, I'm not going to give you the name of the place that was written there, especially now. It's better to keep that secret to myself until the bitter end. And maybe, just maybe, protect you from seeking it out yourself. I hope so, anyway. I couldn't believe my eyes when I found that sheet of paper tucked away inside that crumbling Bible. It must have belonged to my great-great-grandmother. And yet, it was the first real thread of information I could work with to figure out the mystery my grandmother planted inside my mind. I took that little sheet of paper with me and left the Bible at my father's place, reading it over and over again with the village name buried into my mind as I got to work trying to find something, anything, that could guide me to solving this mystery. I must have spent nearly 3 days digging around online, looking up local information, online boards, and more. The hunt for Drover's grave was stuck in my mind, and yet even with this small bit of information, I was still having a hard time finding anything. Then, it hit me. First 'twas whales, them hunted down, their bones flung deep outside the town. Whale hunting. They would have never mentioned that little bit of information if the village wasn't involved in whale hunting, dragging them on to the shore, butchering them, and leaving their bones to bleach in the sun and salt. Whaling was very common in Newfoundland for centuries, and even when the practice of it started to decline over time, it never really stopped until the early 1970s. That little bit of history mixed with the idea of this village being a long-forgotten or abandoned place was enough for me to narrow down my search. I started scooping up whatever lists of old abandoned whaling villages in Newfoundland that I could find, scraping through every name that popped up in front of me, until finally I found it. I actually found it. A single name faded away from time, yet the moment my finger tapped on the name and the tiny map showing its location, it came to life to me, giving me purpose to seek more once again as Sorry, I forgot what I was going to say there. I can barely hear my own thoughts, let alone try and write all this down for you, and it's only getting worse and worse. Anyway, I found it, and I was going to make it my goal to find it and see just what Drover's grave was, once and for all. I took my time getting ready, planning out possible routes and areas I could possibly drive to, packing what I thought I would need, checking out old maps to see if I could get a proper location of the area, and eventually turning to Google Maps to see the place. Google Maps was interesting. I had a clear view of the area itself, but it didn't look right. I could spot what looked like old houses, but the image of the area was too blurry to really see anything. Plus, I didn't see any sort of gaping hole Drover's grave was supposed to be. Either time had eventually filled it up, or it was trying to hide itself somehow. In the end, I decided to work with an old map once I was ready to head out. Having a solid map in hand would probably help more than a digital one in the middle of nowhere. I was so close to finding this Drover's grave my grandmother scared me with for so many years now. Yet it was the pit of my gut I should have listened to, telling me at the time that it was a bad idea to stop where I was and leave things be. Driving there, I kept asking myself what I was actually going to find. What was I even expecting to see? The best answer was just a great big hole by the shoreline, probably filled in by now with dirt and rocks. Maybe there wasn't anything there at all, and this was just another one of those old folk tales to keep children in place. If Drover Grave was real, time had most likely wiped it off the map by now. It took the better part of the day just to get close to the area. I spent the night in an old run-down motel, which I will never return to again, that seemed to have its best days behind them. When morning came around, I was back on the road again with shitty coffee in hand. I was so close to the site that I was getting excited. It must have been an hour or two when I finally turned off the main road and started to drive down an old rough path that was tucked into the trees pretty well. It was not a fun ride down that path. The road was like a snake trail, turning left and right over and over again. To my surprise, the road ended near an old cabin that had definitely seen better days, with the front wall nearly bashed inwards. The door was nothing but splinters behind yellow RCMP tape. Whatever happened here, I did not want to know, as I parked my car close, but not too close. Something bad happened here, and the last thing I needed was to have my tires ripped apart by the broken glass and metal flung everywhere in front of this cabin. The place felt off, is all. Once my car was parked, I grabbed my gear, slipped my backpack on, and checked the direction I needed to go before pushing my way into the forest. Walking through the woods was brutal, and you have to understand, Newfoundland's trees can be rough to get through. Sometimes they're just normal trees, enough space to walk through without a worry. But these trees were clumped together, almost like trying to push through a wall at times with how clustered a lot of them were, thanks to the never-ending wind some places had. Trees here were so tight together they killed each other off, the dead being held up by the lively ones like it was their duty to keep standing against the wind, branches so strong they could cut through your clothing if you pushed hard enough. 2 hours of this type of forest was rough, forcing me to check my compass over and over again just to make sure I was actually going the right way. It took me nearly an hour just to break the tree line and enter a long, grassy field where I finally saw it. Standing out in the distance, where the sounds of water echoed toward me, was a single standing wall belonging to a house that once stood tall. I had found the village that held Drover's Grave. Like most settlements scattered across Newfoundland, nature had reclaimed most of it back, but what did remain still stood tall, even if it was just a wall or two. Most of the houses and smaller buildings on the outer rim of the village were like that anyway. The further in you got, the more you found that still had some of its roof still intact. Some even still had windows, to my surprise, after all these years. Every house was just a slight variation to each other, a large, box-like house. Some had just one floor, but others had 2 floors. What was surprising was the fact that some of them still had their original paint on them, faded by now, but some of them still showed off the bright yellow, red, blue paint they used, a tradition people now still did to paint their homes in smaller towns, of course. From my understanding, it was a way to help sailors find their way back home somehow. Not sure how seeing a random bright-colored house would help you, but more to them, I guess. The years of wind and salt had chipped away at the color of them, making them more faded at this point. The further I made my way, the more dense the houses and buildings became, small and large in size, and a lot of them now still standing like nothing had happened. Some of the buildings had collapsed in on themselves, leaving nothing but the wooden bones to remain in its place, like a rotting corpse in the open for so many years. It was like everyone had gotten up and left them, leaving everything behind inside of them. The amount of rusted hooks, shambled fishnets, and other equipment left behind, no one cared to come back for any of it. My gut trying to tell me to turn back again as I pushed on. Down by the shoreline, the village touched the sea. A series of old wooden docks built to withstand storms and boats alike still stood strong and tall. Smaller wooden shacks were perched on old wooden stilts driven into the stone floor below them to hold them high enough above the waves no matter how bad it got. A good lot of them were still standing. Some of them had been washed away by the waves over time, only the bony wooden legs sticking up from where it once stood as a reminder.
The docks sticking out into the salted water were like broken fingers at this point. The waves had bashed them for so long it displaced them here and there, breaking off parts of them as well as swallowing them up into the salted sea. I could only imagine the kinds of boats and people who would work on these kinds of docks back then. Fishermen dragging their catch just to gut them and lay them in the sun with salt further inland where the docks tipped on an angle to point them into the sun. A lot of this place was still intact, as if waiting for someone to return and use them once again. The thing that caught my eye the most, though, was high above the town's shoreline and up on top the cliffside overlooking the shoreline itself. At first glance, I thought it was just another house, larger than the others and painted white, but the closer I got, the quicker I realized it used to be a church. Unlike the rest of the village, the church was built differently, taller and more deliberate. Its narrow windows and steep gable gave a stark, almost defiant presence over the entire village. At one point, it must have been far more striking to see sitting on that cliffside, because the spire was gone, snapped off like a bone sticking out of the sky. Time had not been friendly to the church, I guess, and brought the spire tumbling down at one point. Where the spire must have landed was what held me in place as I got closer to where it would have fallen. A sight I still can't believe even now. Drover grave. Beneath the jagged cliff where the old church stood, the ground gave way to a huge pit the poem partly described, and it was massive, way more massive than I thought it would have been. Just by looking at it, I could easily tell you could park 6, maybe 7 cars across in each direction, with room to spare. What made this wound in the earth so much more terrifying was how nearly perfectly symmetrical it was. A near-perfect circle carved into the stone that even with modern-day equipment, you couldn't make it this perfect, let alone all those years ago. It looked carved out, but that was impossible. This was Drover's grave, the very name etched into my mind just by looking at it, getting closer and closer to it with each step. I felt the same sort of fear my grandmother would give me when she spoke of this place. But now, I didn't need to hear those words anymore. The sight alone scared me to the core. The moment I got to the edge, I had to take a look, peering down into this open grave, but couldn't even see the bottom. It wasn't just dark down there. It was like the darkness was a presence of its own, thick and heavy, seemed to swallow up the light before it could even reveal its secrets. Even with the crashing waves nearby, there wasn't even a touch of water around or within the grave itself. It was bone dry. It was like Drover's grave was commanding the waves to never reach its edge. The waves always rushing out near it, but always just out of reach from the stone it was carved into. On the other side of Drover's grave, where it just almost touched the cliffside, there were still some remains of the church's spire, small pieces of wood painted white here. There were a few small pieces of support beams, and more here and there, but most of the spire was gone by now, probably down deep within Drover's grave at this point. The spire was probably the last thing Drover's grave consumed. Now that there was no one, and nothing left to consume, he laid there, silently. We filled it up with tide-born dead, till live ones walked in there instead. Did the people who live here really just start offering themselves to it voluntarily? Why? What could they have possibly hoped to gain? How did something that was used to discard and dump whale bones turn into something so ritualistic? Now thinking about it, was there something down from the beginning? Something waiting and hungering for them to offer more, and just so happened to have a village form around it to feed it? Or did the village simply create this beast themselves, throwing what they thought were scraps of past work only to give the beast they craved a hunger for more than just bones, whispering to them to give it more until it took everything? Fuck. Sorry, I forgot what I was going to say again. My head is pounding like it's about to split open. I had to drive back a few more kilometers just to make it calm down again. I'm going to try and finish this post the best I can. I need to tell you what happened, to warn you all not to come. While I was standing on the edge of Drover's grave, I knew I had to get down there. I had packed plenty of rope to climb down, even took the time to learn how to attach and climb down there properly, but to my surprise, there was already another way down. Closest to the shoreline started what looked like a jagged stone staircase carved out of the side of the cave walls, spiraling down the entire length until the darkness consumed it, never revealing just how far down they really went. They were not small either. The stone-like steps stuck out a good 5 feet in length, plenty of space for me to make my way down with ease. They looked like the cave themselves made them, instead of being hand-carved or anything. But at this point, it didn't matter. I needed to get down there and see for myself what was really down there. Trust me when I say this. I was not trying to call my grandmother a liar or trying to disprove her. A part of me just had to find out what was true and what was not. For years, she spoke of this place and probably didn't know it was real herself when speaking of it. Still, a part of me had to see what was down there, maybe document it myself, and show people that this place was indeed real. That being said, I wasn't stupid. The steps were pretty wide, but one wrong step or slip, and I would be falling down into a pit that I still did not know just how deep it was. I wasn't ready to give myself up that easily, and prepared myself a backup plan. To the side, I pulled my backpack off, laying beside me as I grabbed some gear I had packed with me. I grabbed the rope, my hammer, and a metal piton spike before getting to work looking for a crack or seam to force the piton into. It took me a bit to find a proper one, but finally I did manage to find a good one near the edge of Drover's grave, which almost felt like it was made for this, as I lined up the piton and hammered it in, making sure it was snug into the stone before tying the rope into the metal ring it provided. A couple of knots later, with the rope tightly tied around my waist, I was ready to go. I won't lie. Stepping near the edge again, knowing I was about to descend down into this deep stone flesh wound, scared me a little. I felt my heart race as I took my first step, the sound of my boots tapping on the stone floor with each slow step I took. Trying to be careful as I slowly made my way down. I left my bag up top. I didn't want to bring extra weight with me when I descended downwards. The only thing I took with me was the flashlight I had packed, a foldable knife, and my phone in case I needed to take a picture or record whatever was down there. I didn't want to risk my life for anything else, as step by step, I went deeper and deeper down. Whatever was down there, I was going to see it. Face to face. I was still slow as I made my way down, each step louder than the last as the sounds of the world around me started to fade. I wasn't even that far down, and yet the world outside of Drover's grave seemed to fade away in the distance. The wind, the crashing waves, even the gulls who flew over top seemed to become more and more quiet as I went further and further down this cave's gullet. Worst of all, I was starting to be consumed by the darkness within it, the light above becoming dimmer and dimmer like the darkness was a form of fog. My flashlight could barely cut through the darkness at times, its reach becoming shorter with each step downwards as my free hand held the rope tightly like the lifeline it was supposed to be. My boots were the loudest thing now as the outside world went silent. Only the dim light from the sky above me seems to fade more and more, even if it wasn't that far from where I was. I was crossing some invisible threshold at this point, and the only way to go was down. I clutched my flashlight tightly until my knuckles were white, shaking just a little the deeper I went down this grave of a hole. The darkness had now consumed the light above me, leaving me with just a faint memory of what the sun looked like before I entered, as I slowly kept marching forward, the reach of my flashlight becoming shorter and shorter as I went. Any further down and the flashlight would be better off just turned off. I was just thankful I could see at the very least 3 to 4 steps ahead of me, giving me some space to make sure I wasn't just going to fall down this grave and fill it with new bones. Then I started to hear it, finally. At first I stopped, unsure of what I was actually hearing.
I must have thought I was imagining I heard something. The silence down there was deafening to me at that point, but I heard it again. A small rattle of some sort, deep down inside the hole. It was small at first, like the wind had shaken something loose. But down in Drover's grave, there was no wind, no breeze or anything. It was cold and still, yet I could hear something down there. Just as I started, it stopped for a moment, making the cave silent before starting back up again, but with more rattling in it, louder each time it started again in an unusual rhythm. There was a pattern to it now, as it started up, then died off again, repeating over and over again with more chiming in each time it came alive. Eventually, it wasn't just small rattles anymore. There were banging sounds coming from below, like larger bones tapping against each other, set to match with the rhythm of the small rattles scattered across the floor of this grave as it kept going, never ending now into a soothing-like sound. It was all I could hear as I stood there, motionless, my eyes looking down at the bottom I could not see, but hear instead, even as my body screamed at me to run, to get the hell out of there. Yet I didn't. The sounds, the rhythm, they were soothing to me, like they were calling me to join them, wanting me to join in and become part of this new sound I had never heard of before, until now. I think I smiled at one point, happy to be there for a brief moment, as I stood there and took in the sounds of old below me, man-made or not. I felt comfort standing there. That comfort was shattered when I heard something new chime in, a metal-like sound that tapped out of place compared to the music. It was distant above me when I looked up, darkness holding it from my sight as I heard it get closer and closer down into Drover's grave. I only got a quick second to see it fly past me, a small metal spike zipping past my sight as it descended further down into the hole. It was the piton that held my rope in place, and the rope followed behind it. The rope wrapped around my waist, and I felt a small tug the moment the length of the rope ended, as it hung over the edge and further down than what I could see. It wasn't until the rope went tight I was pulled out of the surreal sense of calmness that my panic started to kick in, feeling it become tighter and tighter, pulling on me more and more. One rough pull made me fall to my side, my hip being the first to move towards the edge as I tried to grip for something to keep myself in place, a struggle I had no proper way of getting out of. I dropped the flashlight at that moment as my hands went for the knife, the only thing I could think of to free myself before being pulled over the edge. I brought the knife to my waist, cutting into the rope as fast as I could as I was being slowly pulled to the edge, only seconds away from being dragged into the gaping mouth of the grave and probably fall to my death. My mind was running miles trying to focus on what I needed to do, cutting deeper and deeper into the rope until not only was I free from the rope, I felt the tip of the knife dig into my shirt, a sudden and sharp pain hitting me at the same time. The rope whipped around my waist, streaks of blood soaking into it before watching it flick over the edge and down into the hole. I laid there with heavy breath, grabbing the flashlight with my right hand, with my left hand pressed where I had cut myself in disbelief of what had happened. I know that position was secured. I know I placed it properly, and I know it could have held my weight and more if needed. How the hell did it come loose like that? Was I wrong and maybe messed it up? Or was it something else? It didn't matter anymore. My one way of making sure I was secured was gone now, and Drover's grave was silent once again. I got to my feet, pointing the flashlight down the middle of this gaping hole in the earth to see if I could see anything, but I couldn't.
Come on down, boy. We've been waiting for you.
An old and distant voice raised up from below, echoing across the walls of Drover's grave as I felt something shift around me. The cave felt like it was stirring awake. The wall shook slightly as the stone beneath me felt slicker than before, like water was finally making its way down here, finally, after all these years. I had awakened Drover's grave. I had to get out of there. I had to leave as fast as I could. I never moved as fast as I did while I was getting out of there. The taps of my feet slamming on the stone steps pushing me to move faster and faster. Trying to go faster was becoming harder to do as each piece of stone I touched was now becoming wetter from the water, making each step slippery and harder to keep myself standing as I pushed myself upwards. Drover's grave had a taste of me, and its mouth was watering to eat me whole. The higher I got, the smaller the steps became. It started to look like they were being pulled back into the walls of this grave, trying to make me fall down into its hungry mouth. But the more I pushed on, the more light started to appear above me. I threw my flashlight away, both hands hugging the wall to keep me stable. My hands scraping against the wall as I pushed myself closer and closer to the top. The pale blue sky above was in the open now. The sound of the outside world was calling out to me louder and louder. The steps were much smaller by then, nearly a foot wide now, as I kept forcing myself to keep going, my strength fading quickly. The rattling. Oh God, the rattling below was so loud and violent to hear. The once soothing music it made, now angered by my need to run, threatening me with the sounds of the predator it really was. Near the end, I had no choice but to jump for the edge of the grave. My arms just reached up and over the lip of the cave as I forced every ounce of strength I had left in me up and over, rolling a foot away from the mouth of the cave until my back laid on the cold, wet stone below me. My body shook from the fear that was forced out of me. Yet I was out. The rattling was now gone, but not the voice.
The grave's got your name on it now, boy.
The voice spoke up and out of the mouth of Drover's grave, holding back a low laugh as it spoke.
And what's been called, don't stay gone for long.
I can't tell you how long I ran for after I caught my breath. I left everything I had there and just ran like my life depended on it. My life did depend on it. I just didn't know it until now. The further I drove away from that place, the louder it called to me. It started off quietly at first, but now it's the only thing I can hear as I write this to you. The rattled sounds of those bones, still violent in nature, singing out to me like I have no choice but to go back to it. And I don't. I don't think I have a choice anymore. Don't start the tune. Don't dig. Behave. You can't unhear the Drover's grave. It has me. It has its tune hooked into me like a hook on a line, and yet I can't do anything but fight it until I'm pulled right back in. The longer I wait, the worse it gets, and worst of all, I know I'll be pulled right back into that damn grave. I shouldn't have come here. I shouldn't have gone looking for a ghost town, cursed from the start. Now the only thing I can think of is how I woke it up. I climbed down its cold corpse and awoke it from its slumber with a little taste of me. I know I'm a dead man, but how far is its reach? How far can it lure people in now that it's awake again after all of these years? Have I condemned those near it to its call now? How long until it goes back to sleep? I have so many questions, yet I'm the only one to blame for this. It was my fault to seek it out like I did, and brought this on to the rest of the world around it. I'm going to drive back to where that cabin was and camp in my car for the night. Maybe being closer to it will allow me to clear my mind just a little. A part of me hopes I can break this curse now placed on me, but I don't think I will. I think I'm screwed. I don't know how many of you will read this. I don't even know if the signal on my phone will even get it out there, but please, don't come looking for me. Don't try to be some hero and save me from this curse. Don't find Drover's grave.
Thank you for listening and delving with me into the dark together.
Please remember to leave a thumbs up and subscribe if you feel so inclined. The more engagement this video gets, the more YouTube will push my content to others.
Thus, the following will grow.
All stories read in this channel will be available on Spotify, iTunes, and just about everywhere else. Links in the description.
Thank you for listening and feeding the cause. We'll be seeing you